I'm back with another video of a pretty rare watch from the 90s. It is a Seiko SBBW035 Fieldmaster, one of the earlier Fieldmaster models, the AGS kinetic model. There were only a couple of Fieldmasters prior to this model. They were pretty eccentric watches, really. A watch that you wouldn't call mainstream by any stretch of imagination, since they combined various features that would be appropriate for any trekking watch. They had features like, measurement of the map, a distance in a map, or a compass built in the case of the watch. This watch is very, run-of-the-mill, standard-looking watch. It does have an austere military line. The titanium grey gives it a very utilitarian look, yet all the three models in this line also had a little bit of the funkiness that you associate with the 90s. This particular model has a purple bezel insert and a very cool looking sark strap, blue sark strap. This is the original Seiko band. There was also another model. This is, as I said, is the SBBW035. There was also another model with the gold bezel insert and blood red dial, and a very rare fully loomed version with I believe it's a white grey bezel insert. So, as you know by now, I've had quite my share of those lovely kinetic watches of the 90s. The Fieldmaster was one of the last ones that I hadn't tried on, and this is because it's not so much an expensive watch per se, but it's really hard to find an example that it's not bit to hell and back, especially the bezel insert, which usually is covered in hairline scratches or even deeper scratches. So it took me a while to find one that had very nice bezel insert without any scratches on it. And the watch is very cute. It's 39mm across. It wears pretty well on your average sized wrist. Not too small, not too big, as you would expect for a 39mm watch, with a bezel, although the bezel is not, the same thickness as with a diver's watch. As you can see, the crown is in 5 o'clock, something you don't see too often, supposedly to get it out of the way, and the usual kinetic power reserve button, this one here, has moved over to 3 o'clock. This is a pretty weird arrangement that you don't see too often outside of divers watches. As you can see, the power reserve shows exactly how much juice there is left on this kinetic cell capacitor. Now this one is not upgraded, since it has the old style capacitor, which lasts for about a week or 3 days, I think, and it works pretty well, keeps reserve. The good thing about these old capacitors is that they do not, if you let them out dry, they will not lose their storage capacity in the same way that the newer lithium-ion capacitors do. Now, the new lithium-ion capacitors do have a very much increased power reserve. If you fit this one with a newer capacitor, it will store up to 4 months of power reserve, while the stock one only has, a few days. But if the stock capacitor works well, there's no real reason to change it, since you can just, set the watch again to standard time when you pick it up Give it a couple of shakes and you are ready to go. As you can see, the case is a one-piece titanium case. I believe this was the first single-piece kinetic titanium case, and the particulars are etched. There we go. On the case part, you can see it says Seiko AGS, one-piece case, etc., etc. And the bezel does not turn. And what are those markings, I hear you asking? Well, these are the international emergency codes. So if you find yourself somewhere out in the wilderness and you don't have any means of communication, yet an airplane spots you or whatever, you can draw those markings on the ground, on the sand, and you can get some communication across. For example, if you are doing okay, you can say LL, which means all's well. If you're requiring food and water, you will draw an F, and stuff like that. But that is pretty nice on those. Focus. It's pretty nice on those watches. It has an inner carbon fiber, sort of. Yeah, I can't get this thing to focus, I'm sorry. And inner, as I said, circle of carbon fibers, which have an elaborate pattern, and an outer circle, more standard. There we go. Build quality is pretty nice. The strap, it's a stock strap from 1995, yet it holds up pretty well, and the watch, I guess, is really made to look its best with this kind of thing. The blue sack strap is pretty nice indeed. There was also a titanium bracelet. I think it was exclusively for the fully loomed version, and it was identical to the Landmaster titanium strap. So, if you have a score, the other version, it's very, very hard to find. Actually, I did bid on one of those, but the price went through the roof. And since I already had this one, I scratched the itch pretty well. It's a nice watch on its own merit, really. The numericals are very cute, the font that's used here. The lume still alive, despite all this time. The dial's pretty cool. It's a very funky, nice little piece of history from the 90s. Now, people asking me, are those watches that you're reviewing, all collectible or something? Am I expected to get one and make money on the long run? To which I'm always inclined to say that watches are not investments. You can never really tell how the price of a watch will fluctuate in the future. And the most wanted Seiko watches today were watches that nobody thought they would become collecting items back in the day, the Spork, for example. But, I've noticed lately that a lot of replicas of vintage watches have started to emerge, and it's always a red flag if you see a seller out on eBay who seems to have the same vintage model again and again and again. Because, for replica makers, it's very easy to copy just about any stainless steel watch. It's amazing what those people can do. I've seen super replicas of Panerais who actually have, even the copying down to the movement. It's probably impossible to tell that the watch is a replica until you take it to a Panerai service center and they, check the serial number. But the good thing about the titanium watches that you see me posting here on YouTube is that for some reason replica makers shy away from copying titanium watches. It's always harder to produce something with a different alloy, and the workmanship of those watches, because you have to bear in mind that these watches, the Landmasters in general, had pretty steep price tag when they first came out on the market. I believe this one cost around $300 or something, or more than that back in the day. So it's always harder, extremely harder for them to copy a titanium or a ceramic watch. And you'll see that, for example, they will copy a Tudor Black Bay, but they will not copy a Tudor Pelagos. So if you're really into buying vintage stuff, and I would hardly recommend buying watches from that are made from more exotic materials, where titanium is no longer an exotic material, but you catch my drift. And watches that are off the beaten path, so to speak. If you're out to get a vintage Rolex, then chances are 8 out of 10 watches that people will show you will probably be replicas. So that was word to the wise. If you do want to collect vintage watches, step outside your comfort zone, get a Seiko, get a Citizen, get a couple of makes that are still relatively cheap. A few Seikos and a few Citizens have started to grow in price during the past few years, but go off the beaten path, do your own thing, find your niche. My niche is obviously titanium watches of the 90s and the early 2000s, and even today's titanium watches, I guess. So find your own niche in this hobby of ours, enjoy yourself, don't worry too much about resale value and stuff, and if someone walks to you with a decent offer, then consider it. Simple as that. Right, so I drifted a bit, sorry about that rant. Just a few words I thought I needed saying. That's it for this watch. I will show you the obligatory wrist shot in a few seconds. Let's pause for a moment. On my wrist is 18.5 centimeters across, or 7¼ inches. So you wouldn't say it's a small wrist, but the watch holds its own. It's not, too small a watch, and it's very funky. The thing about having a strap with a watch is that the strap always, shows off the case more, and this is no ordinary case with titanium gray and all this fancy, lovely purple color that you see. The strap, is barely enough for my 18.5 centimeter wrist. I guess it will do up to 19.5, perhaps 20 centimeters, barely. It's a strap made for Japanese wrists, but that's okay because the watch isn't too large anyway. So that's all for today. Thanks for watching this vid. I made a nice little funky watch I had in my mind to pick up and try out for a while. See you in the next video.